So earlier this afternoon, Packers defensive coordinator Joe Barry had a press conference where he discussed this Packers defense heading into 2023. So I want to share what he had to say, give my thoughts on exactly what he had to say. First off, starting off with just looking at the Packers defense last year. I think going into the season, there were pretty high expectations that lots of us had for how good we thought this Packers defense would be. And I'd say they fell below the really high expectations that I had for them, and I think many of you had as well. I just want to show you the stats from last year just to refresh our memory on sort of how they ranked among most areas around the NFL, then share what Joe Barry said. So I'll just throw it up right here. 16th ranked scoring defense in the NFL. So they weren't terrible, but they were about middle of the pack last year overall. 26th ranked rushing defense in yards per game. So they had one of the worst rushing defenses last year. 6th best passing defense in yards per game, so much better in that area. 16th ranked defense in yards per game. 11th best red zone defense, and 7th best third down team in the NFL. So it wasn't a terrible year. I think the final 4 or 5 games really helped this defense, get back to how we thought they would play in 2022. And hopefully we'll see that consistency start when 2023 gets going. So first off here from Ryan Wood on Twitter saying Joe Barry acknowledges he doesn't know Packers starting safety opposite Darnell Savage, but isn't alarmed early in the offseason. When you have a vacancy, especially in a starting spot, and you have a number of guys in competition, the biggest thing you look for is consistency. So with Adrian Amos, who has been around here for a while now, no longer on the roster, there are, as Joe Barry said, some questions as to who will be that starting safety alongside Darnell Savage. Rudy Ford makes lots of sense. He played really well last year, and I think a good amount of snaps. I think 400 or 500 snaps total. He played really well. There's lots of other safeties here. We brought in Tarvarius Moore from the 49ers. We brought in Jonathan Owens in the past week or so, who started for the Texans a lot last year. There's lots of other players here as well. 7th rounder Anthony Johnson. And so this is going to be one of those positions where there is some uncertainty at that other starting safety spot. And personally, with the way Savage played last year, I was wondering if maybe there's a chance that his spot could be up for grabs. He did get benched for a time last year, but so far it seems like Joe Barry is pretty confident that Savage will be one of those guys starting at safety, while not saying that about the other position. So who knows who it could be. Personally, if I had to guess right now when it comes to week 1, I'll guess it's Rudy Ford, but we'll wait and see how that competition plays out. Then we have here from Bill Huber saying Joe Barry on Van Ness. When he walks in the room, he's a big man. When you see a guy that walks in the room at this size, with his explosiveness and youth, it's scary when you get a young player like that and consider the potential. So that's one thing about Lucas Van Ness. He's only 21 years old. He has massive size and he has lots of potential. And so it's going to be fun to see, as Joe Barry also believes, just what the Packers can get out of Van Ness in the next couple of years, because he has a lot of development to go through. But even Brian Gutekunst said in his post-draft press conference that he expects Lucas Van Ness to play a good amount even in his first season. And so I expect to see him play inside and outside. And so we'll sort of see how that all meshes together on this defensive line. But huge addition. Obviously, when you spend a first-round draft pick, 13 overall, you expect a lot from that guy. And so we'll see sort of what he does his first season. Then here we have from Ryan Wood, Joe Barry on Packers defense. I'm very aware of our roster. I'm very aware of the draft status of all our players, but expectations should be high. So he was basically asked by one of the reporters about having 8 first-round draft picks, because I think that, when you look at the Packers defense, the fact that they have so many first-round draft picks, part of you would assume that they'd play at a higher level. They were 16th last year in scoring defense. I thought they'd be top 5 potentially, maybe, at least top 10 based on the talent there, but things just did not work out. And so I think that lots of people are wondering that, in this next season, which will be Joe Barry's 3rd year as defensive coordinator, if they don't take that next leap forward to be maybe a top-tier defense instead of middle tier, will Joe Barry be around after his 3rd season? And that's, I think, debatable, because there was some questions even early or middle of last season before the Packers went on a good run defensively as to whether or not Joe Barry would return. And I think that those final 4 or 5 games, allowed the Packers to bring him back. And I do wonder that if he, if the defense hadn't turned around then, if the Packers would have a different defensive coordinator now. So hopefully we see that defense we saw in the final portion of the season. And then here's Joe Barry himself commenting on those inconsistencies last season. Here for Matt Schneidman, Joe Barry on his defense. We can't be up one week and down the next. We got to find that consistency and show up every week. We don't have time to waste 10 weeks. So hopefully we can see that consistency right off the bat coming in next season. And I do think, honestly, that this defense, while we did lose a few veteran guys, Dean Lowry on the D-line, Jaron Reed on the D-line, Adrian Amos, I think that having some of this young talent in Devontae Wyatt, who I think could take a big step year 2, getting more snaps with Lucas Van Ness on that line, once Gary's healthy and Preston Smith with Kenny Clark, I honestly think this D-line will be much better than it was last season. Hopefully hopefully that happens. Then here we have from Ryan Wood. Barry says his defense did a good job evolving late last season, but inconsistencies not at him. There are a number of things, and it starts with me that I need to do better. Asked him what those things are. Barry says situational football and explosive plays specifically. I think one of the biggest things that is talked about among Packers fans, if you look at Twitter, Reddit, anywhere, is those third down situations, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 10, maybe like 3rd and 10, where the corners are just so far off, where there's been situations where the corners are so far off that by the time, even like a quick slant situation, the corner's not able to get there in time to stop the guy from getting the first down. And that's one of the basic things that I think lots of people discuss and wonder, why in those situations does that keep happening? I think that at times, we've seen that change where the Packers corners were able to play a little bit more physical on those downs, which I think, obviously, when you're playing, press man, if you let the guy get by, you could get burned deep, so maybe he wants to keep those guys in front of him. But when it's 3rd and 10 and the corners are lining up so far back, it's like, the offense has a much easier chance of getting that first down. So we'll see. We'll see how this situational football changes, but Joe Barry himself says he needs to get better in that area and when it comes to stopping explosive plays. Then this is the final note from this press conference. It's from Matt Schneidman, saying Joe Barry says his 3 starting cornerbacks, when they break the huddle during OTAs next week, will be Jair Alexander and Rasul Douglas on the outside, and Keyshawn Nixon at slot. Eric Stokes not cleared to practice yet. Barry said it's been good to see Stokes around the building, though. So it's not that Eric Stokes, if healthy, won't be one of those starters. It just seems right now, when OTAs do start next week, Eric Stokes, because of that ankle injury he suffered in the middle of last season, doesn't seem fully healthy to participate in those. And we'll have to sort of wait and see on his status when it comes to training camp and even the season. I would assume he'd be ready by the season starting because it's, he injured himself a while ago, but apparently it was pretty serious. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But if he is not healthy, it'll be Jair and Rasul on the outside with Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. And Keyshawn Nixon did make a big name for himself when it came to kick returning, and I think that was the main reason the Packers gave him, his new contract. But still, he does have that ability to also play in the slot, and we'll see sort of what happens there. If Stokes does come back, maybe they decide to put Rasul Douglas in the inside at corner, and we'll see what happens there. But there's just some questions with Eric Stokes' injury status. So those are my biggest takeaways from Joe Barry's press conference. If you guys would like to stay up to date with all Packers news, feel free to subscribe. I also have a Packers newsletter, which I post on, it depends on the week, but maybe 3 to 5 times per week. And if you would like to receive that, you can click the link in the description down below. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.